Good evening, and I'd like to welcome everybody to the Finance Committee meeting of April 24th, 2025. We have two members joining us via Zoom tonight too, so two of us here physically in attendance, which means at some point in time I'm going to ask our two members who are attending via Zoom to even just put up your hand in your window there. I'll be calling on you to make resolutions and to second them so that Paul doesn't end up on every single one, although that could be fine too. We will move on to item number 2, which is our land acknowledgement. And as standard, we like to read that. So Grimsby is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Hattah-Wendourong, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The regional municipality of Niagara and the town of Grimsby stand with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. Item number 3 on our agenda is always to ask if there are any disclosures of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest. And if there are, with the show of hands, please. Seeing none, that will be noted in the minutes, and we'll move on to item number 4, which is the approval of our agenda. If I could have a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda in front of us this evening.
I'll move it.
Thank you, Councillor Vardy, and Paul will second that. Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee about the agenda before I call for the vote? Seeing none, then resolve that the agenda for the April 24th, 2025 Finance Committee meeting be approved. All those in favor by show of hands? Yes? Can you see Councillor Vardy on? Councillor Vardy, could we just ask for your vote on that approval of the agenda?
Yep, there it is.
Thank you. Item number 5 on our agenda is receipt of the previous minutes. They have been circulated with the agenda. If I could have a mover and a seconder to receive the previous meeting minutes. Paul will so move, and Anthony, thank you, will second. Any questions or amendments from the committee members before we approve those minutes? Hearing none, then resolve that the following minutes be approved. The Finance Committee, of March 27th, 2025, as well as the Grimsby Economic Development Advisory Committee minutes of April 3rd, 2025. By show of hands tonight, please, all those in favor.
When she does, I will let you know.
Councillor Vardy, we're just waiting for your vote. Failing that, I think we still have a majority, right?
Yeah, sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties here.
Oh, okay.
Okay, my
Thank
hand's
you.
up. There you go.
Thank you. Item number 6 on our agenda is delegations and presentations, and we have none tonight. Nor do we have item number 7, consent reports. We have no consent reports. So that takes us to item 8 on our agenda, which are our discussion reports. And the first one is the budget amendment for the library and the art gallery roof repair. If I could get a mover and seconder to put it on the floor for discussion. Member Scandinavo has moved, and Councillor Vardy has seconded that. And I will turn this part over to Mr. Delmonico to walk us through it.
Thank you. Good evening. Last fall, regular roof inspections identified a need for repairs. So a $27,000 project was submitted and approved as part of the 2025 budget. Since that inspection, the condition of the roof has deteriorated further, and quotes to complete the work have come in higher than originally anticipated, requiring an additional $12,000 to proceed with the repairs. Staff are recommending to complete the work without further delay and proceed with repairs now to mitigate further damage. Funding for the additional $12,000 is proposed to be split 50-50 between the Parks Recreation Reserve and the Library Facilities Reserve, consistent with the funding approved as part of the original budget submission. Thank you.
Any questions from committee members? Go ahead, Paul.
Wrong button. Oh, sorry, I was just wondering what previous repairs were done, when were they done? Was it recent, or are they just, this is just, ongoing maintenance and needs to be done after a long period of time? Because usually roofers have some sort of, warranty period on it.
Yeah, that's a good question. Sorry, I don't have that information available, but my understanding is that the repairs, if they aren't going to be done, would cause some continued further damage. Staff feel that the repairs that are being requested would be sufficient for the time being.
I'm sure that's the case, and it's probably definitely to be paid for. The question is there any recourse to the roofer if there was repairs done, say, last year? Because usually it was in a year period because you get winters and summers, but on a commercial roof. But I don't know when it was done, so.
I could follow up on that, but my understanding is that there is no warranty that can be relied on.
Any other committee members have questions? In follow-up to that, I understand that the library is working on what I will call a library master plan, and that there are, I'll say, placeholders in our capital budget going out for expansion of our library. Could you just clarify that, Mr. Delmonico? Because that may help too in understanding why we're sort of, I'll call it patching, but it's more than patching. This is an important roof repair to make because we're having water damage from it, but it might explain why we're doing this when we know that there are some major things coming. Can you just expand upon that, Mr. Delmonico?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there's several capital projects approved, such as collection expansion, furniture upgrades, painting of the library space, equipment purchases. We don't want to make sure that we have the roof repairs in place so we're not compromising those other acquisitions.
And then the last question that, or maybe the last question, I'll say my last question, just to help clarify for everyone. The report asks for 50% funding to come from a library reserve and 50% from what I'll call the town reserve. And that's because the art gallery is technically considered part of our community services department, right, which is funded from the tax levy, whereas the library board is its own legal entity, I'll call it, with its own sort of separate reserves as well. Maybe you could just expand upon how those two things work together.
Yeah, certainly. The recommended split is consistent with the original budget submissions, which was from the Parks Reserve and the Library Reserve. So the Parks Reserve would fund things like town-owned recreation and community service facilities, and the Library Facilities Reserve would fund asset renewal of the library itself. So because it's a shared facility, we felt it would, and the repairs aren't in one spot, they're in various places on the roof. We felt it would be fair to keep it consistent as the original funding, but I think that is certainly something that we should discuss with the new CEO at the library and just make sure that we're consistent on how we use the funding there, because this is a work that's being recommended by our maintenance staff, so I think that we certainly want to be on the same page with the library and make sure that that they're on board with that. But I think it's worth looking at what should be funded from which reserve, to just so we're clear.
And so history in our organization, I guess, is what I'm hearing, is that it has sort of traditionally been a 50-50 split. And maybe it's just my impression, because I don't really know the square footage of the building, but it always appears that the art gallery occupies less space there than the library does, too. So that might be another factor in all of this, to have some discussions with the library board about issues going forward. Not this one. This one probably needs to be done no matter how we fund it, but at least discuss, whether they are, from the library's perspective, I guess they're always comfortable at 50-50 when they may have, 60-40. I don't know what that split is, but probably just worth talking about all those issues so that we're all in agreement on how to treat it. Any other further questions or thoughts from committee members?
I'm good, thanks.
Thank you. Then I'm going to read the resolution again. So resolve that report DCS 25-13, titled Budget Amendment for the Library Art Gallery Roof Repair, which is dated April 24th, 2025, be received, and that the Finance Committee recommends that Council approve the additional funding of $12,000 to complete the Library Art Gallery facility roof repair, funded from the Parks and Recreation Facilities Reserve and the Library Facilities Reserve. And can I just clarify, Noah, should it say for 50-50 or something like that in the resolution? We're approving the funding of $12,000. We say it'll come from each of those reserves, but then we don't say how much comes from each of the reserves.
That was straight from the report, so I'd actually maybe ask the
Yeah, we can make that amendment, just to be clear.
Okay, so the clerk will be adding on something, and I'll let him read it to me as soon as he's had a chance to draft it.
Resolve that report DCS-25-13, titled Budget Amendment for Library/Art Gallery Roof Repair, dated April 24th, 2025, be received, and that the Finance Committee recommends that Council approve the additional funding of $12,000 to complete the Library/Art Gallery facility roof repair, funded 50% from the Parks and Recreation Facilities Reserve and 50% from the Library Facilities Reserve.
And all those in favor, by a show of hands, please.
In favor, yes.
Thank you, and that is carried. The second report that we have in front of us this evening is the 2024 Development Charge Reserve Fund Statements. If I could have a mover and seconder to put that on the table for discussion. Member Scandinavo has so moved.
I'll move it, second it.
Thank you. Mr. Delmonico, if you'd like to walk us through that.
Yeah, so this is the annual statement on development charges, which is before you for information. It was a relatively slow year for development charge collections. There was only 12 residential units that the charges relate to and 2 non-residential developments. The opening balance in the development charges of $9.2 million, with development charge collections that totaled $224,000. There was another $429,000 in interest earned that was allocated to the reserves. A total of $1.2 million was transferred to fund various projects, with a further $84,000 spent to service the development charge debt for Fire Station 2, leaving a closing balance of $8.6 million. And you'll see that Appendix A provides an activity summary by DC Reserve. And most of those projects relate to, there's several studies that you'll see on that appendix. And some of those are funded from the Growth Studies Reserve. Some of those are funded from the reserve that the study relates to. And the reason for that is because, as outlined in the development charge background study, depending on the type of study, if it's considered what's called a service-specific reserve, then it's funded from the actual reserve, such as the Fire Master Plan. Whereas if it's a kind of a broader-based study, then it is allocated to the Growth Studies Reserve. And then you'll also see the report has Appendix B, which provides a summary of other funding sources for those development charge projects. If there's any questions?
Any questions from committee members? Member Demare.
This is not per se to this, what you've shown here, but this is a question about development charges, which historically have been significant. The question is, there's some political movement around that, reducing development charges, particularly in the residential side. So are we expected to be impacted in the future on this?
Yeah, so development charges are, rise out of an act of provincial government. So certainly there's always a chance that policies can change. We will be conducting an updated development charge study this year. It needs to be in place before March 2026. That's when our current bylaw expires. So we will be conducting a review of that. I anticipate, because of the increase in construction costs that's happened over the last 5 years, our rates will likely go up, but we'll see what comes out of that study. I know, certainly development charges been a lot of change lately with development charges. It'll be interesting to see if there's any more that are going to be coming. The question is a political issue. I appreciate that. And the idea that there's some political push to reduce the development charges because it goes into it's passed on to the purchaser of the house, right? So if we only had 12 residential starts this year, but if we're going to have increasing residential starts, the money we would get as a community or as for our finances of the community would be reduced, and that I guess your study will show that what's the anticipation that may affect our budgeting going forward. But I appreciate that you're going to be pulling this report, so that will be very helpful for us to determine any changes we might have in the future on that. Thanks.
Any other questions from committee members?
No hands.
No hands. Then I'm just going to ask a question, and I think it has to do with Appendix B, which is the amounts transferred for operating projects. And of course, we were talking about the Fire Master Plan, and so I'm referring to really the second line in Appendix B, Fire Protection Services, Fire Master Plan and Financial Review operating, and we have a gross cost of $9,565. But I know it was much more than that. Can you just clarify, does that have to do with the first one? And was that just the remainder of the payment that was owed on the contract? Is that why? Because everything would have been paid on that project prior to 2024? Is that how am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, that's correct. This relates to the funds that were transferred out of the reserve into the project for that year. So there could be funds that were approved and transferred out related to these projects in prior years as well. That's probably why it looks a little lower than you were expecting.
Thank you. That might have just been the last amount that was owed on the project. That was what I was assuming, and I wrote down here. I just was hoping I was understanding it correctly. If there are no other questions, then I will read the actual resolution. So resolved that report Finance 25-27, titled The 2024 Development Charge Reserve Fund Statements, dated April 24th, 2025, be received, and that the Treasurer's annual statement of development reserve funds for 2024 be publicly available on the town's website and upon request. And by a show of hands, please, all those in favor.
In favor.
Thank you. That motion is carried. The third item in this section is the report on the Peach King Center expansion cost update for April 25. If I could have a mover and seconder to talk about this item, please. Member Demare has so moved. Seconder, please.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor Vardy. I will turn it over to our treasurer.
Thank you. So the monthly update is here for review. We're still trending under budget. We've now reached 40% construction progress, completion of construction progress, and we've only used 26% of our contingency. We're still conservatively estimating that we may need to use most of it before the work is done, however, so we're reflecting that in the projection. In terms of the construction progress, the facility is starting to come together now. The structural steel work is complete and the concrete floors are being poured this week. Actually, I think some of that work was being done today. And some interior work has now started, including mechanical ducting and plumbing, and we're expecting the facility to be weather tight within a month or a month and a half. Furniture procurements should also be occurring shortly. For the purpose of this report, we're still forecasting that that's going to come in on budget as planned, and you'll see that in Table 2 of the report. If there's any questions?
Any questions on this report? I had an opportunity to go to a session this afternoon at the Meridian Community Center in Pelham and walked around on the second floor looking down into their gyms and some of their meeting rooms and so on. And as I'm walking through, I'm thinking, wow, this is probably what ours is going to be, looking at like. Theirs is only a few years old, and it is truly lovely. So resolved that report Finance 25-28, titled the Peach King Center Expansion Cost Update for April 2025, which is dated April 24, 2025, be received for information. All those in favor, please.
Yes.
Thank you. That is carried. Our last report is item 8.4 on our agenda, and that is the report on the tax levy and tax rate report. Mover and a seconder, please, before we begin discussion on this.
I'll move it.
Thank you, Councillor Vardy, and a seconder, Member Scandinavo. And I will turn it over to Mr. Delmonico.
Thank you. So the purpose of this report is to approve the 2025 tax rates per the attached schedules based on the approved 2025 consolidated budget. In February, Council approved the 2025 consolidated budget to establish the levy requirements for 2025. Niagara Region also approved the 2025 tax ratios as shown in Schedule A, which remain unchanged from 2024. The residential tax ratio is 1. The commercial tax ratio is 1.7349, and there are other ratios for other property types. Property assessment values, so that what you see on your assessment from MPAC, are multiplied by these tax ratios to come up with a weighted assessment. Here at the town, our total assessment is about $5.2 billion, and that becomes $5.6 billion of weighted assessment once those ratios are factored in. That weighted assessment number becomes our denominator, if you like. So the budget to be recovered in the case of the town's general levy, that's $18.9 million, is divided by that weighted assessment figure to arrive at the residential tax rate for the general town levy of 0.00338468 as shown in Schedule B. That becomes the base tax rate, which is used to come up with the tax rates for all other property classes. And that's done by multiplying that base rate by the property tax class ratio in Schedule A. The property tax rates are then multiplied by the assessed property values to arrive at the taxes owing for the year for each property. And similar calculations are done for the other levies. Interim tax bills have already been issued with due dates of March 7th and May 2nd. And final tax bills will soon be issued with due dates of August 1st and October 3rd. Total taxes for regional, educational, and town general services would be $5,767 for the average assessed residential property, assessed at $442,000. Including the rate-based charges, an average residential property assessed at $442,000 with consumption of 200 cubic meters of water can expect to pay $1,431 for the year. Actual amounts owing will vary depending on property types, property assessment values, and actual water consumption. Also, the town will soon be changing the way it bills for water and wastewater. The town has approved a water wastewater billing modernization project, which is currently underway to move to a fully rate-based model in line with all other Ontario municipalities. In doing so, the costs for water and wastewater will be recovered entirely through the water bills and based on factors such as water meter size, water consumption, not based on property assessment value. And we'll be providing a project update at an upcoming Finance Committee meeting. Thank you.
Questions from committee members? Member Demare?
So I just want going through this, trying to understand it. So on those tables you have 2004, 2025, and that was on page 5 of your report. And it was total 5,397, went up to 5,767. That's an increase of $370. And looking at the increases by the subsections, they're all relatively okay, except the regional general jumped up quite a lot, 276. So that got me looking at, okay, what was the cost of that? And I see it seems to be on the wastewater levy from the region. And I believe in the explanation as to that, they made a calculation error on the wastewater calculations from previous years. So I guess they've now recalculating it, and it's going to be more money for Grimsby. So I see that would be an increased cost for us, and that would be reflected in taxes. So am I correct in saying this affects our tax? Or we have less money to spend on other things, we have to spend it for the regional error?
So there's a couple of things there. There's the regional general charge, the 276 increase. That's exclusive of the wastewater charges. And that was, the region had a general levy increase of about 9.6% that the region council passed. With respect to the wastewater levy, the reason for the increase is really, it's threefold. There's increased regional expected costs as a result of the asset management reviews that the region are doing. So just based on that, costs went up about 16% from the previous year. Those costs get all allocated amongst all the local area municipalities, including ourselves. So that's part of the increase. The other part of the increase is related to that calibration error that you mentioned, which has been corrected for, and it's causing a sudden spike. I guess we could say we were undercharged the previous years, and now we're kind of being made up for that. The last item would be inflow and infiltration into our sanitary system. So that's where groundwater and stormwater makes its way into our wastewater system through aging infrastructure that needs repair, for example. And so if our flows to their treatment plant are increasing, then our share of the costs are going to be increasing. And so we do have a inflow and infiltration project that's been approved. Public Works has identified potential problem areas that they're going to be working on this year.
Okay, that's more of an explanation. That's great. The question is, I guess the region made a miscalculation, and you're saying possibly we were underpaid. So in the previous year, so they're now saying, okay, you owe us money. I assume that would have affected other regions or other townships as well, or is it just us?
No, you're right. It would impact the other areas as well. They would have been overpaying for their fair share compared to us, and now it's been corrected for.
And maybe just to add to that, once the adjustment, because we've already paid what we were underbilled for the previous year, but then they also base their collections from us on the new higher base. So it kind of, in some ways, it almost has a double whammy in one year, right? It's like, well, you owe for the error from previous years, and now the base goes up as well, so you owe more for that kind of on a go-forward basis. At least that's how I sort of understood it.
Yeah, there's a true up that's done at the end of the year to compare what your budgeted amount is versus actual flow. So the past couple of years, we've had to pay higher than budgeted amount. And now it kind of makes sense now why that was. And so, but yeah, the previous year's budgets remain low. That's why we had that higher true up at the end. So I wouldn't call it a double whammy that way, but it is, yeah, it's causing kind of a sudden spike in our budget numbers now.
I think when I say double whammy, from a cash flow perspective. But Member Scandinavo had his hand up, so go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. A couple of comments. Yeah, I think that wastewater issue, we dealt with it last year as it relates to the amount we were undercharged. Now it looks like as a result of that, they've adjusted what we're set to pay next year. So unless I've misunderstood that, I think that does make sense. The other piece is that, if you look at the average household, and we're saying the average household is going to have, $5,700 and $5,767 in taxes collected. In reality, only $1,500 is really going towards the town of Grimsby, right? And the remainder going to, the region in some fashion or another, or to education. I'm not sure how to best ask this question, but, is there ever any sort of value for money discussion had with the region? It sounds like, we're obviously part of this, larger regional municipality that provides certain services that, the town doesn't provide. But, we are subjected to collecting these taxes. And, I guess more than 2/3 of it doesn't stay here. It goes towards the regional levies. Is there any sort of discussion as to how we view value for value for money?
I guess I will start by saying that around the council table, whenever we've had representatives from the region come to us, whether it's been about transit or police or any of those things, those questions have often been asked, as to how much we're contributing to the regional pot, I'll call it that, and how much do we actually get in services. I don't think there's ever, in my knowledge, been a study done that actually analyzes it that succinctly. But I can tell you that I will call it a bit of a sore point amongst councillors. Sometimes when we are defending ourselves and concerned about what the region is spending, that question usually surfaces. Tony, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, it's a good question. There are certainly studies and reports out there that compare area to area in terms of different metrics, like the BMA study that gets published every year. So there are different ways that we kind of can benchmark ourselves versus other areas. That's pretty much the extent of it, I would say. But yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I know the region has their own pressures, right? They've like a 2.5% infrastructure levy that's part of that number. Those are things that we understand. There's pressures like that as well. But yeah, it's certainly a valid point.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, thanks. Again, not that this is solvable at this table right now at this moment, but optically, the bill comes from the town of Grimsby. people are paying $5,700 to the town of Grimsby, yet we can only actually control about, again, a third of what we're collecting, right? The remainder goes elsewhere. And yes, I understand the average individual has the opportunity to review their bill or punch their information in on the regional property tax calculator and see where it's going. But ultimately, it seems like we're collecting $100, only controlling $30 and having to speak for a full 100, right? So it would be good, again, not solvable today, but I'm just using my voice to say, to have a discussion about, is there an opportunity to look at some value for money to understand, we're part of the regional police as an example, we're part of the regional wastewater as an example, but, maybe there's a net benefit to being a part of these things that we can, we can describe, but it's just challenging, right, to have to speak for the full tax bill when in reality we keep very little.
And you are so right there. I think our staff especially feel it on the front line too, when when the bills go out and people come in and voice their concern about the size of the property tax bills. That yes, our staff too feel that we control a small percentage of it, and yet we have to collect the entire amount. Go ahead, Member DeMere.
So I understand that, and I agree with that. There's a question is, is there getting a value from the region? And we send a lot of money their way. They collect money, of most recent discussions, they collect money from speed cameras, which goes right to the region. It doesn't come to us, it's in our properties, and they're adding more to that. So to get any credit from that, the money's going there, maybe it should come off our tax bills.
I'm going to ask Mr. Delmonico to speak to that because we do get some of it, and he can expand upon that.
Yeah, that's correct. We do get some of the funds from the Vision Zero program that gets allocated amongst municipalities. So I think we're expecting our first payment shortly. I could give you an update once we have that.
And from what I recall at our Public Works Committee, and probably during our budget as well, the monies we collect from Vision Zero must be used for the same purpose. So for helping to control, I'll say, speeding and traffic control issues and so on. And so it kind of retains its nature that the revenue raised for it must be spent in the same way to alleviate speeding, to promote safety and things like that on our road. So it's not that it's a windfall to the general budget itself, but will be spent in those specific areas too.
I didn't know there was that rebate from the region, but then maybe that if it's for saving and safety issues, perhaps they can put some more signage up with some nice, more glowing warnings so people can slow down rather than getting a ticket and the money going to the region.
At this point, I'm going to say that, that topic has been discussed a lot of times around the council table, and there are a lot of people who agree with you on that one. Member Scandinava, your hand is up.
I'm sorry to belabor this point, but I guess I also want to throw on the table, I think it was, in the early 2000s when the, province was forcing like all these amalgamations of, these regional municipalities. And I'm not entirely sure if that resulted in any sort of cost reductions at the time or better services increased either. So, again, just sort of weighing the pros and cons to both scenarios, but they're probably, again, not a question at the end of my third comment on this, but I am somewhat recommending that we look, if possible, at value for money for the rather large sum of money we continue to send to the region on an annual basis, right? So it's probably good for the taxpayer to know. given the increases over the years, and understanding that the region does have pressures and does provide services, but just a better understanding of, how do we stack up?
And on that note, I'm going to say before we stray too far off the topic of our reports today, we will give that some more thought for sure. And if there are no further questions, then resolve that report Finance 25-29 titled Tax Levy and Tax Rates dated April 24th, 2025 be received. And I'm going to ask you to be patient with me. There's 9 parts to this resolution now. That the Finance Committee recommends the 2025 tax ratios and subclass reductions as outlined in Schedule A be adopted in accordance with the Regional Bylaw 2025-04. And 2, that the Town of Grimsby general tax rates as outlined in Schedule B be approved. And 3, that the Region of Niagara general tax rates as outlined in Schedule C be adopted in accordance with Regional Bylaw 2025-03. And 4, that the Region of Niagara waste management tax rates as outlined in Schedule D be adopted in accordance with Regional Bylaw 2025-03. And 5, that the Region of Niagara transit tax rates as outlined in Schedule E be adopted in accordance with Regional Bylaw 2025-03. And 6, that the education tax rates as outlined in Schedule F be adopted in accordance with Ontario Regulation 400/98. And 7, that the Town of Grimsby wastewater rates as outlined in Schedule G be approved. And 8, that the Grimsby Downtown Business Improvement Area rates as outlined in Schedule H be approved. And finally, 9, that a 2025 tax rate and tax levy bylaw be prepared and the information outlined in Schedule A through H be included in the bylaw. All those in favor, please. And Councillor Vardy? Do we still have you?
Yes.
Thank you. And that is carried. Item number 9 on our agenda this evening, I will just double check this, is correspondence, of which we have none. Under other business, I'll just ask Mr. Delmonico to give us a brief update on a matter we had discussed a few meetings ago that I know he has been working on, and that has to do with the Grimsby Power valuation update.
Thank you. Yeah, this will just be a quick update. We've put out requests for quotes for completion of this valuation. We've asked that responses be back by tomorrow, so we should know more by next month's meeting. Yeah, we're continuing to move forward with that as planned, and we should have more of an update for the May meeting.
Thank you. Are there any other matters of new business that committee members would like to raise? Member Scandinavo.
Yeah, I was going to raise it earlier when we were speaking like the library reserves and the parks reserves and all that kind of fun stuff. Again, I know I tend to bring this up a lot, and my apologies. Understanding that we rely on the use of reserves to fund the future expenditures of the town and replenish the reserves with, tax levies annually other than operating costs. I think everyone sort of agrees with the fact that we should have some sort of like analysis done to better understand the health of the reserves. And I also understand that is absolutely no small feat and no simple task. So I'm curious if, maybe not for this meeting today or not for even the next meeting, but maybe put out a schedule as to when we feel like we will, what reserves we will tackle and when we could expect to have some sort of analysis done by those reserves or per each reserve. Each reserve to me sort of seems like you'd have to put a quote unquote long range plan in place to say, here are the parks reserves, and here's the expected draws over the next decade or whatever the case may be. And again, understanding that that's no simple feat or task. And here's the the reserve, the investment income, the depletion rate, and the additional levies that will be put into the reserve. In 10 years, will these reserves be dry? Will they be healthy? Will our assets be healthy, or will they be in good working order? So again, no simple feat. Again, for $12,000 today, I'm not going to put up a fuss for that, because obviously the roof needs to be repaired. And it's an immediate need, but maybe like longer term, it's just easier to understand when we're approving expenses from reserves. It's easier to understand what we're committing ourselves to when we have a quote unquote long range plan in front of us. But also, sympathizing with the fact that that is no simple request or no simple task. Just looking for maybe a longer range plan on when we can have these longer range plans in place.
I'm going to ask Mr. Delmonico to respond.
Yeah, thank you. No, those are great points, and we are working on that. Hoping to bring not only a forecast of the reserves, which will also help identify the potential debt needs over the next 10 years, but also sustainable funding levels that would come out of some of the work that's happening with the asset management and the levels of service. That's the next step with that asset management process. So, yeah, we will be working on that. You're right; it is no small feat. So, it is. We will, but it is important, and we will be bringing that forward.
No, thank you, Tony. I totally sympathize with the fact that this is not a simple request. Just looking, when can we, over the next 18 months, the next 12 months, whatever it is, like when are we going to start chipping away at having some sort of long range plans for some of these reserves? Understanding that, of course, we can't stop business from happening in the interim. So I really appreciate you considering that, and I also again sympathize and understand that that is a complicated, complex task which won't happen, in a matter of in a matter of a month or even a couple of months. So.
And I think related to that is the next phase of the asset management work that we're doing. And I will just share a few thoughts that were shared with the Public Works Committee when we had conversations about this. And our senior staff had said, well, some of these needs into the future need to be looked at carefully, because it involves decisions around the level of service that a municipality delivers. And so it could be that, and I'm just making up examples, but that we decide that, more centimeters of snow need to fall before we go out there to do something. Or it could be that we decide that, there might be something we could do to our water and sewer mains to lengthen their life, to improve their life and extend it out further than the standards that we currently have, right? So it is a complicated study to do, and some of that is the next phase, but even given all of that, I totally agree with you that we still have to wrap our heads around it even now. And then it's the sort of exercise, it sounds so trivialized to call it an exercise, but it is the sort of analysis that we need to continuously update too. You don't do it just once and then set it aside in the bookcase and not look at it for another 5 years. It's the sort of thing that we need to continuously look at, and even if we change the levels of service or the standards of service, that it just tweaks the report further as we go along. And so, yeah, but the hard part is getting over that first report, getting it done. The tweaking probably is easier after that, but maybe I could just ask Mr. Delmonico, give us an approximation, like which quarter you're aiming for in terms of the workload for you on this.
I'm hoping we can bring something before budget, so we have that could inform the budget decision making. So probably late summer.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or new business from committee members at this point? Member Jamer.
I looked at the last meeting, we had a resolution passed that The Finance Committee requests council to direct staff to summarize this town of Grimsby's investment fees for purchase and fees for management of 2024, how they're calculated, and present that at the next Finance Committee meeting. Now, obviously, I've looked at what's happening in everybody's investment, portfolios and what's going on in the bond market, and I've got a question, like municipal bonds, we're seeing the yield drop, prices spike. So that was sort of a question around where we are. So before the meeting, I did talk to Mr. Delmonico about that, and he said there's some information coming, but I'll leave him to carry that forward.
Would you like to just talk about it briefly?
Sure. Yeah, there will be some information forthcoming. I just want to make sure that we're going to be sharing the correct information with you. So it's taken a little longer to just put together, but we will be providing some detailed information. We don't want to. There's some concern about presenting it publicly in an open forum with the details for the advisors, kind of for their competitive advantage, let's say. So, but that will be forthcoming.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on other or new business from committee members? I see no hands up. So the next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, May 22nd at 6 p.m. And this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Delight.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.